Hello, everyone. How you doing today? This is Damon Osa and Conte Cunningham coming to you live from the laboratory here uh, for another exciting episode of the HAMA Live interview series. Today, we have a special guest. We're going to do a Meet the Council today, and we're going to have the Chief Operating Officer, Adam Myrie, joining us for a little talk today. Adam's been with the organization since day one. He is the skeleton that holds up our organization. So I'm very glad to talk to him. So sit back, relax, and let's have some fun today, folks.
ليل عجيب ليل عجيب ما كان أحلاه يلا ليل عجيب
And here he is, folks. Mansa Adam Myrie here. How you doing there, Mansa?
I'm all right, man. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Glad to have you with us today.
Glad to be on the show.
All right. So let's start by why don't you tell us a little something about yourself, Mansa? For those of us who don't know you, why don't you give us the quick elevator pitch rundown of who Adam Myrie is?
So, Adam Mansa Myrie, my friends in the HAMA community call me Mansa. I am the Chief Operating Officer of the Historical African Martial Arts Association. So I do a lot of the background stuff, branding and website infrastructure, social media integration, research infrastructure. So a lot of the things the little, gears that make the things work, everything from ticket sales to finding a way to get money from point A to point B is essentially what I'm responsible for. So I'm kind of the pusher for some of our projects as well. So for example, with the Mamluk project, I am the project manager for that. So while I am not physically doing the translating, I am backing up the research and making sure that things get done when they're supposed to get done. And making sure that anything that isn't happening the way it's supposed to be gets put right. So in general, that's my role in the association.
Okay. So you're a martial artist. You are the chief operation manager, officer for HAMA. You do a little singing, do a little drumming, do a little writing. So I am most happy to tell everyone that that you are an acclaimed author. Tales from the Sands of Time, Volume 1, was your first publication. Is that correct?
It's actually, I think it's my third. I've been in 2 books prior. This is actually my first solo publication.
Okay.
I wrote an essay on male sexual entitlement and rape culture in a book called The Forgiveness Project, Tales on Sex, Manhood, and Relationships. So sort of for men, by men, on how to undo some of the societal damage that, shall we say, makes some men think that they can do things with women that they shouldn't. There's also, I wrote the foreword to a book called Conversations with White People, Discussions on Rape. and it was a project that I helped do some of the research for about race relations I want to say the new millennium, but I'll say the early 2000s or the early 20. What do we call this? The early third millennium, whatever you want to
Yeah,
call it. This time,
yeah,
right?
whatever it is.
So, Tales from the Sands of Time, Volume 1 is the first book in a 6-book series that I have been spending the last many years working on. That takes place in a fictional universe that I created.
Okay. Well, tell us about that one, because that's the one that's directly related to what we're doing here with HAMA.
Yes.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about Sands of Time?
So, Tales from the Sands of Time is a compilation of 3 short stories based in this universe called the Sunya. The Sunya is, I don't like to do this comparison because it's not that, but if you consider Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones, imagine something along those lines in the same genre and on the same
Okay.
scale, but in an African context.
Gotcha.
So the culture will be familiar to anyone who's familiar with East African culture. Similarly, in the way that somebody who's familiar with European culture would be familiar with Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings.
Okay.
The creatures and the monsters are based on African lore, kind of like hyena men, for example.
Okay. I was about to ask what are some of the creatures you have besides hyena men?
Okay, so the creatures that we have are in the series they're called genie. In the first book, the first book is written in the years prior to their creation in the universe. The book I'm writing now is actually includes their origin story.
Okay.
But the genie are essentially a type of creature that was created by this religious leader by the name of Amma. So Amma is how she's known, which also means mother. She created them to be the protectors of the weak. But what she was unaware was that by creating them, she actually corrupted nature. And so those creatures, which were supposed to be man's protectors, turned out to be the worst thing to ever be unleashed in the world.
Okay.
So what she did was she appealed to her gods for help. And instead of the gods asking for help, she got an answer from that universe's equivalent of the devil.
Okay.
And not realizing who had given her the answer, these creatures were created. So there are different classes and different types. For example, you have the Dagujin, which translates to sort of like the dog jinn, or they're kind of a corruption between dogs, hyenas, and men.
Okay.
So they're similar to hyena men in that they sound like hyenas. They eat people, scary, but they also talk. They have their own parlance, which is very similar to pigeon.
Okay.
You also have characters called the Barok which are kind of like crocodile monsters almost. They're like 10 feet tall with red eyes and scales, and they actually speak in a way that is most similar to the way that humans will speak. But
Okay.
they're also the most intelligent of all the creatures in terms of they are the most intellectually on par with humans. And they kind of have their own they're kind of like the de facto leaders of that class of creatures. Um, and so there's a lot. It's like a whole Dark Lord scenario, and all of it sort of fits in. It's really long and complicated. I could talk about it for hours, but that's the personals of the creatures, or some of the creatures that find themselves in the story.
Okay. Well, tell everyone where they can find your book.
So right now, I've actually taken the first edition off of Amazon, but I will be putting the second edition up soon. I'm just waiting to get the rest of the edits back from a publisher that was working on it that no longer exists. But fortunately,
speak up. Can you come a little closer to the mic?
Yep. Is this better?
There you go. There you go. Much better. Much better.
So I will be releasing a second edition.
Okay.
The second edition was supposed to be the version that was released through a publisher that I had gotten picked up by, but the publisher ended up having some problems due to the COVID situation, and they had to close their doors.
Yeah.
So I'm back to selling them on my own again.
Okay.
So once I get the second edition back, I will be posting that and for sale on Amazon. I am working on the volume 2, and I also have the first version of the big series. I call it the big series because it's a trilogy that's based in the same universe that takes place thousands of years later, and that is expected to come out within the next year.
Okay. Well, good luck with that.
Thank you.
You mentioned the publisher. You're having some trouble with the publisher. So that brings me to a topic that is near and dear to you. I'm sure you know where I'm headed. The Mamluk translation. So
Yes.
how long ago did we start that translation, Adam?
So the translation project, the Kickstarter was initiated in 2018. We managed to raise enough money for our goal. We did pay the publisher in full. That was great. The translation got started. What we didn't realize is just how much of a mess the book was. And
Okay.
this is what I mean. So at some point in the history of the book being compiled, somebody bound the book, but they didn't bind it in order. So that
Hmm.
means all of the pages, so you might have a section on swordsmanship, which should all be together, but maybe pages 1 through 20 are in the beginning, then pages 21, 35, and 42 are in the middle, and then pages 50 to 75 are at the end, but then page 76 is somewhere in between.
Hmm.
So that whole thing was just completely discombobulated. Uh,
Okay.
so that was, the first phase of the project that we ended up starting back in 2018. It took quite some time to review it and change it and get all of that. Then there was the preliminary read. So we've been on this for
Right.
coming on to 2 years now,
2 years.
and we would like to get it done, but every time we take another step forward, we end up taking 2 steps back with something new
Yeah.
and stuff in the text as we work on it.
Yeah. I know, how much that you're working behind the scenes to get this project complete. But I just, I wanted to get it out there. This is a personal project, a personal passion of yours.
Yeah.
This started. You didn't start this project, but it's in your hands now, and you put your all into this because of how you feel about the Mamluk, the empire. So I know that's one of your favorites. You're kind of a North African guy. What is it about the Mamluk Empire that appeals to you so much?
I find it very interesting. I mean, first off, one of the things I find interesting is the origin story of the Mamluk Empire.
Okay.
If you think about it, Mamluks, meaning one who was owned, they were slaves. In the Arab world, slaves weren't necessarily just people you'd have working on the field, similar to the way you'd have it in the Americas.
Right.
Slaves would be a royal vizier. A slave could be a soldier. A slave could be a general, a commander, a chief cook. He could be a minister in the government. Any kind of position a slave could take. Um, Slave soldiers obviously were very popular because it was an easy way to bulk up your forces and to have a captive, highly trained group of soldiers that are loyal to you and not the country, a commander, or a clan per se. So that's the first thing, and the fact that the Mamluk elite, so this would be the ones who we mostly think of as the Kipchak Turks, managed to change their lives from being slaves to becoming sultans. So that in itself is kind of a story for resilience and
Yeah.
or resistance. And as you can see by the giant Jamaican flag in my background, I'm all about that.
Right.
So definitely, I that's one thing that resonates. I also really like North African culture. I really enjoy things like Moorish poetry. I know
Come a
that's
little
not.
closer to the camera. Come a little
Yeah,
closer.
I enjoy a lot of aspects of North African culture. I really like the
Okay.
music and the poetry. I also think that the Mamluks are just a really interesting collection of peoples,
Hmm.
because as I said earlier, we often think about the Kipchak Turks who formed the Mamluk elite and were the elite cavalry, but the Mamluk armies were very diverse. They
Yeah.
brought people from every corner of the Islamic world and other parts of Africa. You had Nubians, you had Berbers, you had Arabs, you had Copts, you had all these different ethnic groups that made up sort of the foot soldiery or the common soldier in the Mamluk army. Their martial traditions are so ubiquitous, in that you see the legacy of their sword fighting skills in arts like El Matreg. You see the influence of their armor in different parts of the Sahel. You see influence from their weapons in different parts of Sudan, for example. Most people can think about, when they think about swords in the Islamic world, they often think about curved sabers. But for the most part, the swords were cruciform. or they were,
Okay.
they were generally straight cruciform swords, and you see that legacy in the Sudanese Kaskara. And of course the Takoba. So I mean, there's just so much about the Mamluks and Mamluk culture that is just phenomenally interesting. And the
Yeah.
fact that they were sort of the Islamic world's answer to the Templars or the Knights Hospitalier is also a really interesting perspective. And the fact that it was trained, built, and they were in Africa. I could ramble about this forever, but that's why I like the Mamluks in a nutshell.
Well, rambling is not bad here today. We got some time to fill, so please ramble on. You mentioned the influence that they had in the Sudan weapon wise. Would you want to speak to that? How was their weapons or armor influenced sub-Saharan Africa?
So what I would say is, and I want to be careful about this because we do have to note that in sub-Saharan Africa, and I hate that term because it
Me
is
too.
kind of in, how do I put this? It puts too many things in the same box that shouldn't be. But, and this is a but, I know but negates everything you said before, but this is obviously, that being said, you see the influence in terms of the way that they had their horse culture, their cavalry, sort of their cavalry training. We talk about how important the use of horses were for the Mamluks, and the fact that that culture went south. There are records of, and I really wish I remembered the names because I hate it when that happens because it sounds like
Lean forward.
Sorry, there is an article or a record, historical record, a source that was quoted somewhere in HAMA a while ago, and I remember reading this. And I wish I remembered the name because I hate forgetting these because it sounds like I'm making it up, but this is totally true. That one of the kings of Ethiopia actually hired Mamluks to train their elite soldiers or their version of the knightly class.
Okay, I've
you
heard
have,
that as well.
so you have armor pieces like chainmail, the sort of the Persian style helmets that you see worn in Sudan. You see items like bazabands that appear on Sudanese armor and in the Sahel as well. So there are bits and pieces from the Mamluks that sort of trickle their way throughout the Sahel and the Islamic portion of Africa.
Okay.
I mean, there's more, but the fact is we're still just getting the research done. We're really just getting our feet wet, seeing how deep the rabbit hole goes. And this is a really great adventure, by the way.
Okay.
Yes.
So as we're talking about weapons and armor, why don't you? What's your top two African weapons?
Top two African weapons. So the first, as you guys know me, is the spear. I love the short spear. By short spear, I don't mean the Zulu Ishwa. I'm talking about something similar to Jarid or something similar to a shorter version of the spears that you see carried in, for example, like Sudan and in Egypt. They're roughly about 3 to 4 feet long. I really love that particular style and size of spear because it is incredibly maneuverable. I mean, while you sacrifice some of the reach, you get a lot of great angles, you get a lot of versatility. You can use it at the length of a sword, or you can use it at the length of a knife. It's just a great weapon and wonderfully paired with a shield. In terms of my next favorite weapon, I'll definitely have to say the Mamluk Saber. Initially, it used to be the Shamshir, but Shamshir is a bit controversial because it does come from an external influence by way of the Persians and the Arabs to trade. But the Mamluk Saber, I've really gotten to really like it as a weapon choice. It's slightly less curved than the Shamshir, but still gives you the benefits of a curved saber. And there's also that nice Yelman on the back that you can where you can use a nice wrap shot with it. It also optimizes it for thrusting because it's less curved, and it also has that sharpened Yelman on the back as well. So it gives you a few more options than the Shamshir, but you also still get to have that same feel.
Okay. So is this a training version of the weapon that you're referring to?
That is the training version of the Mamluk Saber, yes.
Okay. And that top part on the inside of the curve is bladed, it's sharp.
Yeah, so that's what's called a Yelman.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. All right. So, let's talk about this. I see you got your new gambeson.
Yes.
You were pretty hype about that. Um, tell us about your training, Mansa. For those of who don't know you, you had a pretty serious accident a little while ago, which left you quite immobile, and you've rehabbed yourself. You put some videos up the other day of you kicking your practice dummy in the head, and I was definitely shocked. So why don't you tell us about your training, how you've recuperated, you really rehab from your accident, and how HAMA has helped you with your rehab.
Of course, HAMA was my medicine, my friend. Um, so about 4 years ago, I had a very bad car accident. It was so bad, in fact, that I was actually forced to walk on a cane for quite some time. I gained a whole bunch of weight. I was almost 300 pounds. I mean, I'm almost 300 now, but I'm a slimmer 300 than I was back then. but
Yeah.
but essentially, it was bad. I was sick. I was in pain all the time. I was not feeling. That's around the time we actually started doing HAMA. This was in the very beginning when we all met and we had started having the conversations. And I was mostly just interested in HAMA specifically for the research aspect of it because it was helping me with writing my books.
Right.
Enter Modern Tahtib and Dr. Adel Bilal. I sent him an email because when we all talked about it, we had a conversation about what martial arts we would specialize in. And so I decided that I wanted to focus on modern Tahtib. I figured that would be something that would help me with my mobility and all of that. So I started with the training, and thanks to his kindness and willingness to take the time to train me, even though he's all the way in France and I'm all the way here in Canada, he walked me through the basics, and I trained and I stretched and I trained and I stretched and I trained and I stretched, and eventually my mobility started to improve. I had slimmed down considerably. I was definitely feeling healthier. All of these things were coming together, and the more I did it, the more I wanted to do. This also culminated with Dr. Boulad actually visiting Canada to do an in-person training with myself and some of my colleagues up here in Canada. And we actually... Here we are, a gift from Dr. Adel at the Modern Tattib Discovery Workshop. Here we come in. There's the man himself speaking with one of the students.
But now, the guys from Costa Rica and Honduras require structure.
Yes, that's the man.
That was the man himself.
Dr. Boulad himself trained me, yes.
Yes.
So after that training session, he gave me permission to teach modern Tattib here in Canada and to spread it throughout North America. Despite the fact that I haven't been given the rank of master, I've been Anakin vibe. Which I'm totally fine with. I don't want to be called a master anyway, even if I was.
Okay.
It gives
So
me the
that was actually HAMA's first international event.
That was our first international event, yes. So through that, I got started, and then I branched out into HAMA Treg, which is the foundation of my swordsmanship research and reconstruction. Modern Tahtib is the foundation of my spear work. Mixed with, of course, what we've been pulling from the texts, from different books like the Mamluk Lancer and from the Mamluk manual that we are translating now. So that's kind of the main aspects of my training. And as that's been improving, I've started to dip my toe back into kickboxing lately, and sort of trying to get back into shape with that, which is, how do I put this, a challenge. I feel a bit like a baby deer getting back into kickboxing, just because in my mid-20s I was much better at it than I am now, and much more springy than I am now.
Right.
So trying to reclaim the abilities that I had back then. It's a work in progress, but everything I do is a work in progress, and that's why I document and take videos so that I can look back on it and laugh. But definitely, that's sort of the backbone of my training. My approach to reconstructing the martial traditions of medieval Egypt is I will take living arts like modern Tahtib And like El-Matreg, I will match it with what we do know about the weapons and the properties of the weapons that we're studying.
Okay.
I will also look at some of the historical accounts of battles and historical images to look for guard positions or the ways that people would be caught in action in battle scenes. And then in the
Mhm.
middle, I have the whatever we're able to get translated. So the living arts have given me things like the mechanics and the properties of how I should move based on the sort of cultural maxims of the region. And the historical images and accounts give me ideas as to what they were capable of doing with these weapons. And then
Mhm.
what we're able to translate tells me how exactly how they train. So even though, for example, I may not have all of the background that came with the threading the needle exercise, El Matreg has given me the basic mechanics to be able to move appropriately so that I can apply those techniques to the swordsmanship in a way that generally reflects how it's expressed in the text.
Well, that's I'm glad you brought that up because that is actually the basis of a lot of the things that we have as HAMA are trying to do. When HEMA, historical European martial arts, when they attempt to recreate a lost art, fortunately for them, they had quite a few different treatises, manuals. They had some traditions. They had some things written down, and they were able to piece together a lot of things. But even in the HEMA community, there can be some disagreement on, say, how this manual goes from this move to say this move. And part of that is the experimentation that we're doing, and that's really a fun part for me. You mentioned how we're using mechanics and things from the living traditions, such as as Tatib, in an effort to say to recreate how the Egyptian battle axe might have been used. When I took your I took your Tatib class at the gathering, um, and I definitely a lot of the simple movements, the opening movements, just lended itself so well to bringing that axe down. Um, you know, so talk about, if you don't mind, not just for you, maybe for the rest of us, the process. You did, but go a little bit deeper. The process that we do to recreate things um, that are basically dead, and how we're trying to revive them.
So generally, we have three types of sources that we look at. The first, which is the ideal, which are historical records, manuals, and what is the other word I want to use? Basically, primary sources. So sources that actually come from the people in the period in the time. That's the ideal. The next is taking from living traditions from either the specific culture or from the region. So, say for example, we wanted to figure out how the Azande would use a mambele and a shield. Um, the fact that there isn't a manual on the use of the mambele and the shield doesn't stop us necessarily from being able to figure out how they could have been used. We can look at the Shotel traditions in Ethiopia, which is a country that is near where the Azande live. The Azande lived in southern Sudan and the Congo. Ethiopia borders Sudan. So, and sickle swords or forward curving swords are endemic to the region. So, we can have an idea as to how they would use things like a casting blow, or how they would use the center of the curve to do a full deep cut. We can look at things like Nyangatan stick fighting, which is similar to a lot of the Bantu stick fighting styles that range all the way from Nigeria into southern Africa. So we know the general idea of how they would have used a shield within that region. So
Okay.
we can start with that. So that will at least give us a basic idea of, if I wanted to use these weapons, this is how I could use them in a competent way. Obviously, we're not saying that this is exactly what that is, because we don't have, an Azande Mambele master to walk up to us and say, yes, that is exactly how you do it. But we can take the weapons, look at their properties, and then look at the fighting mechanics of the region and apply that. We also look at things like cultural dances. Oftentimes, things like cultural dances in oral history are very much poo-pooed, especially in the West. But for cultures in Africa and in the Caribbean, dances are a tool for pedagogy. If you look at modern tahtib as an example, a lot of the dances in the modern tahtib movements, like the small horse or the camel or the big horse, um, are all movements that teach you footwork that can be used in sparring or in a combat situation. For example, the small horse is a way to shrink your body and step off of line to avoid a straight blow, as an example. So then you have other things like some of the ceremony involved will help you with holding a specific guard position. So when you look at people who do capoeira, while you see capoeira regional and it looks like they're doing a dance, a lot of it is attribute training. You are learning how to be able to fight on different angles. You are learning how to be able to move tight with kicks. Like if you look at the way that some people apply a martello after somebody throws a meia luna at them, I'm getting esoteric with my terminology, but you see that they are sort of dodging the movement and responding, but that is sort of in the dance while they play the game. So watching those games that people will play help us get an idea for how these different weapons were used. So that's like a secondary source. And sort of a third source that we use is essentially just, so we'll be looking at essays and we'll be looking at other works by people who are experts in the field. So we'll be looking at translations that people may have done. We'll be looking at work that somebody else is doing in a similar field to get some frog DNA, for example. For a lot of the North African work we do, because it is very similar to Razmov's or Persian martial arts, because the weapons are very much the same. In many cases, not all cases, but many, Razmov Sar has been a great tool for helping add context. While their approach to the same weapons is a little bit different, their the mechanics of how they use them.
Razmafar, for those of us who don't know.
Yes, Razmov Sar is a group that was started by Dr. Manashir Khorasani. He is the founder of the Razmov Sar Persian reconstruction. So they actually reconstruct the martial arts of medieval Persia.
Okay.
So we have actually one of their members on the Mamluk project, Frank Perrin. Hi, Frank. He's been a great resource as well. With
Yes,
his
he has.
North African martial art or North African history. And he actually has a Mamluk kit at home, which is great. So, he's very much into this as much as we are. But so that's another source. And then on top of putting all of these things together, we basically take all that information, throw it in a blender, and then try to source out specific techniques. Then from those specific techniques, we develop drills, and then we take those drills and we apply them in sparring to see whether or not they work. And if they do work, great. We put a check mark next to it unless we find something in the original text that says not to do that.
Right.
Or if it doesn't work, we take it back to the drawing board and we try to figure out what about it did not work. And that's essentially been our process this whole time. Take the information from all these different sources, throw it in a blender, pick out some techniques and some drills, throw those drills into a sparring environment and see if they work.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you clarified that. Because in the process of getting some of this information out, I've heard quite a few people who just don't understand what we're doing. People who don't necessarily see things from different points of view have said that what we're doing is made up, or some of what we're doing is made up and make believe. Basically, it's just because they can't understand it. I had a long conversation with someone that kind of came around the end. And for you brought up the dance. The problem with them was they were so used to Eastern arts, Asian arts, where there is a kata, there is a form. You need to do these 3 moves 1,000 times. Here it is. It's like this. Let's go, march. That they couldn't understand how free flowing African martial arts are. So I used this to help get it to them. I use the story of we had Ogun Day, Sons of Ogun,
Yeah.
Sword Ogun. I think that's what we called it. I hosted that here in Philadelphia, and I had Troop Dada Troop Dada African Drum and Dance. They came and they taught us the Ogun sword dance. And as we're learning and we're doing certain moves, and so Mama Oyen, who was teaching, there's one move in the dance where you're chopping like this, but you're doing a stutter step backwards. And so she showed it to us, and first time I grabbed my stuff and I jumped back and I did it. And she was like, "Wow, like what? How'd you learn that?" And I'm like, Mama Oyen, I told you, like, I stick fight and I really don't like getting hit. So I've learned to scoot backwards and throw that shot at people. And it's just, there's so many moves in the dance that are martial related. One of the ones there was it's like a knee. You kind of go up and down on your knees as you're doing it. And it was hard on my knees. It was so hard on my knees. And but it was such a valuable tool for teaching how to stand up while fighting. Let's say you get knocked over and you have to get up. How your brain, you don't want to think how to do it, but if you've been training and then all of a sudden you're swinging your sword and next thing you know, your knees are under you and you're up, boom. That's the benefit of it. So dance has definitely been important. So we have a question. We have a few questions, but I'm going to put up this one from Alpheus Burton. Do you have any plans to bring African martial arts to the world of mixed martial arts, MMA? So I'm assuming that's just a question for the organization. But since you're the guest, Mansa, I'm going to let you take that one.
I'll say as far as HAMA specifically is concerned, that's not necessarily our mandate. I mean, if we do produce somebody who wants to take what they've learned through the research that the organization has been able to share and help facilitate, then, more power to them. But African martial arts are already in MMA. We're seeing a lot of capoeira guys show up and martelloing the heads off of people all over the place. So African martial arts are already there. Capoeira is already there. It's already put a foothold in. I would love to see people who have spent time learning Brasa, who have spent time learning Lam, or have spent time learning Morengi, coming to tournaments like K1 or mixed martial arts in the UFC. I would love to see that happen, but I think that as the arts themselves professionalize, because that's what's happening now, we're going to see that happen more. I mean, France already, for example, goes to Senegal to recruit traditional wrestlers for the Olympic team. That already happens. Right. So what we're really looking for is getting the credits. So we want the African martial arts to get the credit for producing these fighters. Not necessarily HAMA, but martial arts that come from Africa and the African diaspora getting credit to be in more professional sports.
So, Alpheus, my first HAMA Live, my first interview series was with Maxwell Kalu, and he is the founder and CEO of African Warrior Fighting Championship. So basically, what they are is they're a group who is taking traditional sports and they're packaging it for the modern world. So I think, instead of taking these traditional arts and putting them in a modern sport, I'm going to leave Dambe and go to the UFC. I think our goal, or what I would like to see, is Dambe on the same level as the UFC. There is, I would honestly, personally, I would so much rather go to a packed gym or stadium and hear the drums going and the whistles and the flutes and watch three guys, a couple guys with their hands wrapped doing Dambe with the whole modern era. So I believe that should be the trajectory for HAMA in the future. We have another question from Sifko. Nice shield in the back, the side. Okay. And his second question was, what is it called? Okay, so this is a Naguni stick fighting shield that I made. These are based off of the shields carried in South Africa. A lot of different indigenous people in South Africa use this shape of shield. Commonly, they're called the Zulu shield. And this is a smaller version used for stick fighting. So that is a stick fighting shield behind me. Thank you, Safiso. Thank you for the question there. Mansa.
Yes, brother.
You know I was coming here. We're going to talk about the elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room would of course be your boys in Carthage.
Yes.
So,
long live the sacred band. Down with Numidian traitors. Sorry. So they betrayed Hannibal, okay?
Yes.
They betrayed him.
Yes, they
The
did.
Roman coins. Sorry.
Yeah, some, and they had their own coins. You know, we didn't have to go there. You know, we had our own coins. But
the Carthaginian coins were just as good.
Yes, they were. For those of you who don't know, Mansa is a huge fan. I'm trying to think of a good word. He's not a fanatic. We'll say fanatic. He's a huge fanatic for the Carthage. He's a Carthage file. That's what we'll call him. What is it about the Carthage Empire, Mansa, that you love so much?
I think the thing that attracts me to Carthage is the same thing that attracts me to the Mamluks. It is a testament, or one of the things, it is a testament to the diversity of Africa as a continent in general. You have all of these different groups of people from all these different parts of the region that built this wonderful empire. I mean, we often give credit to the Phoenicians for founding Carthage, and we should, because they did, right? I mean, if Dido didn't do that oxhide trick, we wouldn't have Carthage. But the fact is, Carthage was, even though it was founded by Phoenicians, it was built by Africans. Yeah. The Amazigh tribes from all around the region were the ones who came and brought the trade. They're the ones who built the cities. They're the ones who married into the Phoenician elites and populated the armies and designed the Great Harbor. I mean, it was Africans who built it. Whether you consider it Black Africans or brown Africans, they were Africans and they put it together. So it's lean
forward. I want to hear that a little clearer. Let's get that. Okay. All right.
Whether it was Black Africans or brown Africans, they all came together and they built it.
But you said they were Africans.
Yes, they were African.
All right. Okay.
So
all right.
So the other thing about it too is it also demonstrates something that is how do I put this? The uniquely African approach to empire.
Okay.
Where the Carthaginians were very much, they weren't like they were sort of the counterbalance to the Roman idea of an empire. We look at the Romans, and when the Romans took over land, everybody had to learn Latin. Roman institutions were put into place. Roman coins were being used. People who became Roman citizens had to adopt Roman religion. It basically just became an extension of the city of Rome. Carthage, on the other hand, was very much laissez-faire. Keep your culture, fight the way you want to. We're not going to force our military doctrine on you, but pay tribute and fight for us when we call. Beyond that, you are autonomous. So it's kind of like it's kind of the idea that they weren't out there to control and conquer. They were out to build economically. They would rather trade and build a trade relationship with you and cooperate for mutual defense versus forcing you to become a Carthaginian in the way that a Carthaginian lives and behaves.
Gotcha.
So they were very different in that respect, and also they were very resilient. People often think about the First and the Second Punic War, but there were actually three. Carthage wasn't actually destroyed until the Third Punic War, which wasn't really a war, in my opinion. It was more of a massacre.
Mhm.
And this is largely because Roman interests or Roman economic interests of specific Roman elites did not like the fact that Carthage was becoming an economic powerhouse again, slightly independent or as a vassal of Rome. They drummed up this whole idea. This is where the whole concept of Carthago delenda est came out, because it's like the Romans defeated Carthage in the First Punic War. Carthage rebounded and had an army in Rome for over a decade. They defeated them in the Second Punic War, and then by the time the Third Punic War arose, the same things were happening. Carthage was economically rebounding, the population was becoming more independent. They were asking questions about whether or not they should really be still paying money to Rome. Like, they were becoming independent again, even though they weren't a threat to Roman Empire or Roman power. The fact that they were growing and developing and taking over, for example, the olive oil business, were great examples of why they just would not be destroyed until they were completely destroyed. And Rome had to literally destroy Carthage completely and build an entirely new Carthage in Rome's image afterwards.
Haters gonna hate.
Haters gonna hate.
Haters gonna hate. Haters gonna hate. Um, so tell us a little bit about the Carthaginian army. Like, how were so you said they didn't force their military doctrines on their vassals. So what was a typical Carthaginian, what would a typical Carthaginian campaign or army look like?
So the typical Carthaginian campaign army was very diverse. I'm going to use the example of the Second Punic War because that's the one everybody knows and talks about the most, and it was at the height of Carthaginian military power. So if we're going to talk about a field army, so we're not talking about the navy at all, because we can get into triremes and quinqueremes and all of that. But so at the core, you have the Carthaginian Sacred Band. These are citizen soldiers, born and raised ethnic Carthaginians, whatever that means to you.
African.
They were African, and they fought in a way that was similar to the Greeks. There actually is what I like to call the Spartan Reform.
Okay.
There was a man by the name of, I'm going to butcher it. It might be, I'm not going to bother trying to say his name, but he was from Sparta, and he was hired as a mercenary to completely reform the Carthaginian Sacred Band. So this is why you see them using hoplons and sarissas, and why you see them using swords that are similar to a ziphos, why you see them wearing the bronze breastplates that are very similar to what you'd see Greeks wearing. They had their own sort of Montefortino helmets and all of that. That was their own local design. And a lot of the Greek weapons were modified a little bit to suit Carthaginian culture, but generally they fought in a very Greek or Spartan way by the time of the Second Punic War. That is the core, elite, top shelf Carthaginian army. Then you have the armies from various vassal states. So, for example, the Numidians. Numidians would be the cavalry. They're an Amazigh people who rode horses. They didn't ride saddles, and they didn't often wear armor. Some of them did. The elites did, who could afford it. But generally, they would just be bareback on their horses, and they would control it with one piece of rope. They would carry javelins, a small shield, and basically their purpose was to zip in, throw some javelins, zip out. Or if the enemies are trying to regroup, they would harass them by riding in and taking a few out here and there and then riding out. Or if the enemy was running away or routing, they would use them to chase them. And finally, they would also be used to flank, most famously at the Battle of Cannae, where the Numidians, after chasing, most famously at the Battle of Cannae, where the Numidians, after chasing off the Roman cavalry, swept around and closed the third side of the Roman line. So that ended up leaving the Romans surrounded on three sides.
Wow.
So you have that. Then, of course, you have the Spanish conscripts. So these would be people who would be from modern-day Spain and Portugal, Iberian Celts. They were the ones who carried the famous falcata sword, which is a nasty chopper, by the way. The falcata itself was used with actually a shield that was similar to a buckler. So it would be a small shield and a short sword. And later on, some people would pair the falcata with the hoplon, or they would pair it with the Roman scutum as they picked up equipment from the Romans. They had a lot of similar equipment to the Romans, so they did carry things like the Spanish gladius. The Romans actually didn't have the Spanish gladius at the time. They hadn't adopted it from them yet. They were using their own type of sword that was similar to it, but that's a different thing, because most people, when they think about the Roman army, and I'm just going to use this as a caveat on the side, they often think about the high imperial age with the lorica segmentata, the helmet, and all of that, and that's not what they were dressed like during the Punic Wars.
Okay.
They had one little square breastplate here with a little cross here, their giant scutum, the short sword, and their spears. I can't remember if they were using pilum at the time as of yet, but generally the Roman army in Hannibal's time and the Roman army that we usually associate with the Roman military looked completely different.
Okay. That makes sense.
So then you also have, so you have those, for example. Then, of course, you might have people who might come from the southern desert. So you might have Libyan short spear and javelin throwers who were noted for their abilities with the short spear and the shield. One of my favorite weapon pairings. So they were noted for that. So they'd be used similar in a way that I believe it's called histati was used in the Roman army, where they would run out, throw their spears, and then run back in the line.
Okay.
Or they'd also be used for skirmishing and that kind of thing. They also used a lot of mercenaries. So they would hire Greek mercenaries. They would convince Celts from France or Celts from Cisalpine Gaul to fight for them in the Roman army. So you see a lot of people fighting in their traditional way. So it was very much when the Romans would kind of use a hammer for everything, where everybody was in the same sort of, it fought in the same way, and they were very much interchangeable. If you lost 10,000 men in this unit, it'd be easy to replace them because you could replace them with many of the same units that you've been training. With the Carthaginians, it was different because their army was very diverse. They had a mix of heavy cavalry, light cavalry, skirmishers, and those hardcore sacred band men. Then you had the Celtiberians with their heavy choppers. And then, so if, for example, they lose their Numidian cavalry, they don't have a replacement for their Numidian cavalry because that was the cavalry. So that's some of the strengths and the weaknesses. I mean, the strengths are that you have a lot of tools to play with. So if you know that the Romans might be weak on a particular area, you can take a unit that is very strong in that same area and replace them.
Okay.
Or put them against that Roman weakness. And if you have a particular weakness, you know that those particular units shouldn't be used in this scenario. Or if you want to trick the Romans into thinking that you have a falling line or whatever else, you take a particular set of men and you put them there, and that's sort of the role that they will play. So he had a lot more pieces to play with.
Mm-hmm. And the biggest piece what was the elephant.
Yes.
How did they use, because there's a lot of myths about how Hannibal used his elephants. Do you know how the elephants were used tactically?
So I will say, based on my research, so I'm going to caveat that with I am not an expert, but this is what I am reasonably certain of. They generally use them to scare the holy bejesus out of the Romans or whoever they were fighting. I don't know about you, but I would definitely not want to face down a 4-ton elephant if I didn't have to. But they would be used to charge lines, break up lines. They would also be kind of used like towers. So you'll have men on top of the elephants throwing javelins. You might have men on the sides of the elephants guarding their legs so that the elephants can bring their strength and their trunks to bear to pushing people over and stepping on them. I mean, similar to the way you would see elephants used in warfare by the Romans later on, by the Nubians, by the Indians, by any other group of people, the Persians, everybody who used elephants used them in a similar way. 1, they were terrifying. 2, they were great for breaking up lines. And 3, they were also great positions to throw things from.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we got some good thanks. Thanks a lot. I didn't know that. We almost have no documentation. Very nice. So we are almost, we've gone for about 55 minutes so far. So let's close out, Mansa. Why don't you tell us what your plans are personally for the future and where you would like to see HAMA go and say, I'm gonna say 6 years. Where do you see yourself and where do you see HAMA in 6 years?
Where I see myself, hopefully still alive after this pandemic. Knock on wood.
Right.
Secondly, I would like to see myself with more books. I'd like to have at least another 2 books out in the Songs of the Cinia series. I definitely would like to improve in my martial discipline, learn more, possibly be teaching some classes in an actual physical location I can afford to pay rent in because students are paying me. As far as HAMA is concerned, I want to see HAMA doing consultation for action films because I am tired of seeing action films that say they're portraying Africa and they're either being disrespectful or not accurate. I would love to see HAMA have more teachers around the world. I'd like to see us have members, actual paid memberships, and more gatherings and more events so that people can actually come and we can celebrate martial traditions in an African way. I mean, I've been to some tournaments where it's quiet and austere and everybody's, all stuffy and straight back. And when we had our gathering last year, there was dancing, there was singing, there was drumming, there were, we had fires burn, we had the incense burning, we had the whole 9. We had our traditional outfits. I mean, we had everything going on that time. So I want to see more of that. I want to see I want to see us bring more masters from Africa to the West, and I want us to send more people from the West to Africa and the Caribbean and Latin America to go and do fight camps and study under these people and bring these arts back and build leagues and make the martial traditions of Africa and the diaspora as ubiquitous as karate, kung fu, and taekwondo.
I like that. I like how that sounds, Adam. I do. I think we're on the same page. We are definitely on the same page. So I think we're going to end it here, and I would just like to say thank you very much for joining us. I had a blast. I always have fun doing these, especially with you and Damon. It feels like kind of feels like I'm home. Well, I am home, but feels like I'm at home talking to my cousin on the phone. So I had a blast.
Yes, man. Of course, it was fun.
Yes,
Let's do it again.
Yes. Wes, yes, sir. We listen. We're going to have some more topics, and I'm definitely going to bring you back for some specialized comments on some things. All right.
Of course.
All right. Thanks, Adam. HAMAland, thank you very much. I want to thank all of you for joining us. Once again, this has been a guilty pleasure of mine. So I want to thank you all for bearing with me as I'm this is a learning process for me. I really have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm learning as I go. So I want to thank you all for taking the time and enjoying and learning and growing with us. Thank you very much, folks. You have a good day.